Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference channel. My name is Jesse Day. We're already counting down to the next VRIC, January 21st and 22nd, 2024 at the Vancouver Convention Center. As soon as tickets become available, there will be a link on this channel, so definitely stay tuned. But for now, we're doing interviews every Friday with great guests, and today we have an investor and the founder of the Next Big Rush newsletter, top mining and energy news in 3 minutes a day. It is Fabi Lara. Great to talk to you again.
Hey, Jess, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm counting down to VRIC for sure because I'm always there. I wouldn't miss it for the world.
Yes, I'll be there as well. It should be a ton of fun. So I want to get started. We're going to talk about the uranium space today. Of course, we both did a panel, how to make a boatload of money in uranium and keep it at the last BRIC with Rick Rule, Nick Hodge, and Warren Irwin. I thought it was a great success. So let's continue along those lines and start off with your current outlook on the uranium space. Because if social media is any indicator, we're seeing sentiment at all-time lows. The equities have moved down in the last little while, or at best sideways recently. People are bemoaning the sector, watching the daily spot price, shaking their heads, wondering where it all went wrong. Is this just a classic case of impatience? Because the fundamentals continue to look very strong to me.
Uh, in short, yes. The longer answer, I think people have to realize that the uranium story as it develops is not just a mining story, right? It's one thing for, say, the price of gold to be up quite a bit, and then for the miners, junior miners to catch up. This is the second slowest industry in the world, aka mining, with the actual slowest industry in the world, which is the nuclear industry. And so as we look down the pipeline and we see that, the price of uranium has already gone from $18 to 50, actually reached almost 60, and then it came back down. People are forgetting that we can kind of look into the future when it comes to the nuclear fuel cycle to a certain extent, more so than the other commodities. And we're seeing that future demand is much, much, much higher than anybody could have imagined even 3-4 years ago. And because you're dealing with something that takes so long to even contract, I mean, we're hearing, from the Sprott Uranium Trust that the buyers of fuel are saying that they don't just ring somebody up and buy immediately. They have to actually go out and meet the people and contact people they already know and have relationships with. And that's the spot market, right? It's not like you go into a computer program and you buy it today because everything is so slow. I think people, they lose faith because at the end of the day, the actual equities aren't 100% correlated to the commodity. And I don't want to say I love it because people are suffering when they see their stock go down, right? Especially if they haven't, been through this before, or if their expectation was just straight up. It hurts. So I don't want to, belabor the point that this is really good, but actually it really is, because if you see where the commodity is going and you know that right now the equities are following it, or they're not trying to predict that move, then that's where the opportunity lies. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a point in trying to invest in your uranium stocks, because if they moved perfectly, there's no opportunity. That's where I see the most opportunity. The fact that we can see the nuclear fuel cycle tightening, utilities coming to the table, and demand soaring, especially when you look 10, 20, 30 years on. And the equities aren't moving. If anything, they're moving sideways or down. It's rare when they're moving up. If maybe they're making a discovery, they're moving up. But in general, they haven't really performed. And that's where people can come in, study up. And if they make a decision, I think it's a brilliant buying opportunity. But what do I know?
Yeah, well, no, that's classic Ben Graham. The price you pay matters. And I think if more people paid attention to that fact instead of hoping for uranium to just suddenly go to the moon tomorrow, which seems to be a lot of the sentiment out there, they would be able to deploy more capital into the sector and in the end benefit much more greatly. So I was talking about fundamentals of the sector looking strong earlier. Now, the White House has introduced a bipartisan nuclear energy bill, and I'm quoting the bill here. This bill prioritizes the future of American energy security by establishing common sense policies to help deploy nuclear energy, which is a clean and reliable generation source for our nation's electric grid. So part of this involves developing the tools and workforce to keep current reactors safe and to review new nuclear technologies. So, how do you think this benefits the overall nuclear energy picture? And is this a strong tailwind for uranium companies located in the United States?
So, from listening to the Department of Energy coming out of the US, they have been signaling very strongly in interviews and speeches that they have been doing that they are quite happy to rely on partners such as Australia and Canada for their nuclear needs. However, when they came out with bills such as this, and with proposals to triple the U.S. energy capacity within the next, I guess 30 years, it kind of begs the question of, is Canada going to be able to provide everything that the US needs? And will it be able to provide at the time when the US needs it? Because if the US is making plans to triple its capacity now, you have, a considerable lag between making the decision today and actually, fuel buyers coming to the table and buying that material. But it seems like the whole world has the same plan, right? You see different news coming out of different countries, and the move towards nuclear, I think it's also a sign that both sides of the aisle are coming together and saying, look, the reality is we need more electricity, period. And now you could make the political argument of, there is, two extremes. Green energy is a complete scam, or, we need to save the world or else we will die. And I think nuclear is one of the only forms of, generation that is actually attracting both sides of the aisle, which is super rare. And it's the first time that I see this. I think most investors that have been in this play for several years expected the previous administration in the US to be more pro-nuclear and to actually push, the narrative that the US should get with the times and not just go for extensions, which, we have seen a lot in the US, but to actually lead the world. And it's finally happening with a Democratic leadership, which to me came as a complete shock. But I think it also just shows a shift in the culture and the way that people see nuclear energy, because it's absolutely crucial for not just the investment to work out. Because I mean, we're here trying to, figure out what's going to go up and down in price. At the end of the day, energy generation is very strongly correlated with economic prosperity, right? You can look at any number in the world regarding the ability of a country to generate electricity and its wealth, and you will see that there is no wealth without lots and lots of energy. And having this happen right now is just a boost to a story that was already quite strong. Quite happy to see that.
You touched on Canada there for a moment, and I want to shift there, but before I do, you're on the board of a company formerly Rush Uranium, now Rush Rare Metals, that has past producing uranium mines currently exploring there in Wyoming in the US. So maybe you could give us an update on what's going on with Rush.
Sure. So it used to be called Rush Uranium, now Rush Rare Metals. It does not mean that anything has materially changed in the company. We basically changed the name in order to appease the regulators and make everybody happy, because there is a moratorium on uranium mining in Quebec, and that was our first property coming out of the gate as we IPO'd. And so we didn't want to, give this idea that the uranium in Quebec was mineable at the current law, under the current law. So we changed it to Rush Rare Metals. And what's happening right now with the company, and one of the reasons why I haven't been talking much about this publicly, is because we knew of the name change. And so, we needed to give it a little bit of a break before everything was decided. But what's really exciting about this company is not just the rare earths in Quebec. which is something that I think we're hearing more and more about now. I have never seen so much government money coming into rare earths, critical metals, critical materials in general. And I'm talking about US, I'm talking about Asia, I'm talking about Europe. It is a global shift. And I can probably pinpoint the last, I want to say 6 months, where everything has started to move. It's almost like they've opened the floodgates to government money towards, lithium and rare earths and, cobalt, nickel, whatever. You name the material that is needed for electricity and EVs, that's what the government is actually, backing. And from that, what we see is with Rush, we have a uranium property and we have the rare earths. Love the rare earths that's being worked on right now. And we expect something in the next month to 2 months regarding preliminary work in that area. And we also have the Wyoming property. Now, why I love the Wyoming property so much is because it's the uranium property. It is basically a project where there used to be mining from, I believe, the 60s up until the 70s. And I think they mined just about 500,000 pounds of uranium. For them to have been mined in the 60s, I'm assuming that the geological work would have been done in the 50s. So now the big question about that project is, thinking about really old, antiquated geological work versus the kind of modern geology knowledge that we have now, modern techniques. What can we apply that's modern to, this site that they wouldn't be able to do back then? That's what's really exciting to me. Going back to the US, and this is why the US is a really important jurisdiction, not just because of what we've just mentioned, but I think people don't realize that the US was the Kazakhstan of the 60s and 70s. They were the big player in town and they were competing with the USSR and the Russians. And they just needed all the uranium in the world because it was made at the time, not for nuclear energy generation only, but for war, right? And what happened is the whole of the US almost died when it came to uranium mining, right? It just slowly petered out, and the price of extracting uranium in the US is higher because the grades are lower. But we're still talking about the uranium that we know in the US from several decades ago. And so I'm really excited about, this property and this company, because now I can finally talk more about it, that we have a final name. And I'm really looking forward to seeing, geologically, there have been some drilling that we are actively going after. Let's just put it this way. And once we have that information, that's really going to paint a picture of what we know to be on the ground. But also it's going to hopefully give us a picture on what else can be done in the area that the previous owners wouldn't have been able to do because it was so long ago.
What's up, guys? Quick break. My name is Jay Martin. I'm the CEO of Cambridge House and the host of the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. I wanted to quickly point your attention to a link right beneath this video where you can subscribe to our new weekly newsletter. If you want to better understand the minds of the best investors in the resource space, subscribe to this newsletter. I author it personally every Sunday and I love writing it. Hit that link below to subscribe. All right, back to the interview.
Great. Well, looking forward to an update on that in the future. I myself am a shareholder, so definitely want to hear what's going on as you continue to develop that project. Now let's switch to Canada, my home country. The government there seems to be echoing a lot of the sentiment that's happening with the US government. The new federal budget was released, and it appears the government is indicating clear and strong support for nuclear energy. In addition to being included in the Clean Energy Investment Tax Credit, nuclear is also being made eligible for a range of other tax incentives in Canada. So this bill, much like the US one, doesn't directly relate to the mining of uranium, but more nuclear buildouts means more uranium will be needed. So would you say this is bullish for supply demand fundamentals? And do you think this will eventually extend directly into the mining industry in Canada when it comes to the mining of uranium?
I think it could, and it should. Coming from the government, I always say it doesn't mean it will. Right? I'm a little bit skeptical when it comes to that, but it goes back to what was the narrative previously and what is the narrative now. And I think that's a very important shift, because for, I guess, my life, and I was born in 86, which is an important year in nuclear history for, the bad reasons for Chernobyl and whatnot. But for all my life, I have heard that nuclear is bad. And it's just that reactive gut feeling to the word nuclear without really stopping to analyze what it meant. And one of the things when I visited the WNA symposium in London back in September of 2022 is that the industry came to the realization that they did not do a good enough job of informing people about the work that, that they've been doing for several decades, and that what the current generation, ourselves, had as an idea of what nuclear meant was actually completely off, right? And because of that, they had several issues. And we have to remember, millennials aren't children anymore. We're 30, 40 something people with kids, jobs, companies, etc. And we are the next world leaders. Therefore, I think this coming out of Canada is a really good sign that, things are changing. If you're willing to give a tax credit, that is a very good sign that the government is saying, this is the plan for the people. This is the plan for the future. In order to bring investment money, these are the areas that we're going to, give subsidies, tax credits to. And I think that's really important. As long as our generation doesn't mess it up, then I think it's an important move. And I mean, hopefully that would actually help out the mining industry in Canada. I think the mining industry in Canada has suffered a lot of setbacks, regarding government regulation, and the fact that Canada is essentially a mining economy, just like Australia. And it seems to me that the earlier Canada realizes that it is an extractive, whether it be oil or mining, that it is essentially an extractive country, then when it gets to that, I think we'll flourish. And I keep saying they and we because I'm technically Canadian as well, but I wasn't born in Canada. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, if I was to give my true thoughts about the Canadian government here and now, this would not be a family friendly program. So I'm going to not do that. But sometimes politicians do get it right. And hopefully, this is one of those situations where we see this allowing the nuclear industry to proliferate and flourish in Canada. And that will be a bullish setup for uranium. So, now some potentially bearish news. You mentioned challenges for the miners coming from the government. Well, now we have the province of Saskatchewan that has laid out a strategy to increase mineral exploration and double critical minerals production, including uranium. It's on their list by 2030. And the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, which represents 73 First Nations in Saskatchewan, says this critical mineral strategy infringes on inherent and treaty rights, and it appears they could be looking to lay claim to at least a portion of these mineral rights. Should we be selling all our Athabasca Basin uranium stocks here, or is this a wait and see situation?
This is one of the questions that I'm damned if I say yes and I'm damned if I say no, right? Because one of the two outcomes is going to happen, and it's kind of 50-50. Unfortunately, my crystal ball is broken. But here is the approach that I'd like to take with that, because that is the big question of the day. I think it's important to always remember that when we build our portfolios, we are not overly dependent on any one jurisdiction. And I'll keep saying that, pounding the table, until people wake up and realize there are no safe jurisdictions when it comes to mining. There are different jurisdictions with different characteristics. Nothing is guaranteed, and everything that can go wrong in mining will go wrong in mining at some point. So first of all, if you have too much of a holding of the Athabasca Basin, probably not good to begin with for reasons such as this. Secondly, once you figured out that you want a little bit of maybe US, Africa, or Australia, and a little bit of the Athabasca Basin, if that's your wish, then the second thing becomes, okay, what do we know? We know for a fact that companies such as NextGen and Fission have their own agreements with the First Nations that are located within their tenements. That's one of the things. There is the question, however, of maybe this could also apply to companies that have, these previous agreements, because from my understanding, what some of the First Nations are claiming is that they have verbal agreements that may not be contemplated in written form, that would include, I guess, anything that's deep underground, anything that you can't go there and use for agriculture, for example. So anything under that, could be theirs. I have learned in my short life that when you have a legal issue, it almost does not matter if you are right or if you're wrong. The cost will be both in time and money, and whether they win that or not is almost irrelevant at this point if you have too much exposure to that region. So my way of thinking would be wait it out, but don't be all in the Athabasca Basin, and understand that the value creation of the companies that you hold will actually, dictate whether that's a problem or not. For example, if you are betting on a company to make a discovery, or they're making a discovery, I don't think that's going to come into play, right? Because we're talking about actual development, and that's several years out, as we have seen. If you hold I can't even call it late stage developers. There's maybe one late stage developer. The others are early stage developers in the Athabasca Basin. And the question becomes, okay, how much longer is it going to take for them to actually, come to market? The weird thing about this is it's actually good for the story of uranium as a whole, right? It's bad for those companies because they're going to have to deal with this issue, I believe, in one way or another, whether it's something simple that goes away quickly or something that drags on for years. This is going to have to be addressed. But it kind of begs the question, okay, so does that actually mean that the next gens of this world are going to come to market when people believe that they will? Will this actually delay supply coming to the market? And this is what I see a lot of the times. The bad news associated with nuclear and uranium are usually supply constraints. It's companies that are trying to bring production online, and they have delays, they have financing issues, they have local issues, which is bad for them, but it's good for the overall story. Don't want to dance on anybody's grave, but this actually makes it for a stronger case.
Yeah, I like that there is no safe jurisdiction. As Rick Rule says, people have this misconception that if they're investing in a region with people that look like them and speak the same language as them, that it's somehow safe. Whereas he points out his biggest losses came from people who look like him that speak English, and they took the money according to the rule of law. And this could be one of those situations where, as you said, even if this is challenged and defeated over the long run, it could cause slowdowns. It could cause extra expenditures from some of these companies. But we definitely don't have the full picture yet. So I agree, wait and see, but geographically diversify. Don't ever be all in on a single jurisdiction. So the Swiss-based company Zuri Invest is starting a new physical uranium fund, and they're looking to raise an initial $100 million for something they're calling the Uranium Actively Managed Certificate. So this is yet another vehicle for investors to get exposure to the price of physical uranium. What are your initial thoughts here, and how much of an impact do you think this fund could have?
I am very bullish about this fund coming to market because it tells me that I would like to think smart money is coming into this as a thesis. Now, it goes back to the very first question you asked me. This is a story about the commodity uranium, right? It doesn't mean that necessarily because this Zurich company is coming in and buying up the spot, that all of a sudden, all the juniors that don't have any uranium or that are looking for uranium or that have currently uneconomic uranium are all of a sudden going to fly. Going back to it, it is really, really good so that they come into the market, buy up the price, and they're going to be competing with spot. They're going to probably also be competing with, I think it's ANU, the Kazakh equivalent to that. So soon enough, we're going to have 3 different vehicles coming into the spot market, bidding the price up. That cannot be bearish in anybody's world. There is one particular fact about this investment vehicle that is a little bit different to what we know SPUT to be. So SPUT is the Sprott managed trust. And what they do is they buy uranium into the physical market and they hold it. They cannot sell it. They basically take all the pounds and take them to uranium heaven, as Rick would probably put it. With this Swiss vehicle, they can actually sell the uranium. So if I'm a large investor in the fund and I buy, $1 million worth of units with them, what happens is if I want to then exit my position and there's nobody to buy my position, what they will do is then they will sell $1 million worth of uranium into the market, and then I'll be able to, I guess, redeem my position. I think that could create more volatility in the price. But then again, they're looking to raise initially 100 million, which is very small. So I guess the bigger question is, how much more than 100 million can they actually capture through time to move the price up and down? For now, I think people that are coming into this fund, they're not coming in for a weekend. They're not coming in for a couple of months. I think these are big check writers that are going to see this pan out over the long run. So I think it's very, very big news because it goes to show more people are looking into the space and they're seeing what we're seeing. We're seeing increased future demand, and we might be seeing, increased current demand with utilities coming back to the table and just a new cycle starting again. It's good to see that, pounds are being sold. And I mean, Cameco, every now and again, they come out and they say, look, we've just signed with this country, with that other country. And it seems like a lot of their pounds are already earmarked for the contracts that they're signing. These are fairly large contracts. So we're not crazy people to be making up stories about, potential demand that might happen 50 years from now. This is happening today. And this is a confirmation that people with deeper pockets are also seeing.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you there. And thank you so much for joining us today. For those who want to learn more, could you tell us about the Next Big Rush newsletter and anywhere else you'd like to direct people online?
For sure. So people can go to thenextbigrush.com. And it's basically a way that I found to keep on top of news and actually help people who maybe don't have 3 hours per day to scour the interwebs and find all the good mining and energy news. And so I look everywhere. I look at Australia, I look at Europe and North America, and I pick the very top, most important mining news, and I condense it in a really punchy, sometimes slightly satirical. I like to think that sometimes it's even funny. We like to poke, fun at all the right people, but it's just a quick way of saying, okay, if I missed, the big news of the mining investing world today, then let me catch up. 3 minutes and you're done with the whole email, and it's free. So if you're unhappy about it, you can ask for your money back.
Great. We'll put a link to that in the description below so people can check it out. And I'll see you at the next Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, January 21st and 22nd, and definitely hope to speak to you again before then.
For sure, Jesse. Thank you very much for having me. Cheers.